Today on the bench we have a Cobra 148 GT. Turn that down. Cobra 148 GTL. Customer sent this in. He apparently just got it on eBay. Used it for like 5 minutes and poof, no output power. So he sent it in. He also said that he thought all the electrolytic capacitors had been replaced. Looked like a cheap eBay cap kit. So go ahead and change those. No, actually, they were all original caps. They just happened to use. Usually, now granted, this is one of the newer ones with the. They've done a lot of changes to these radios over the years. Like I say, this is one of the newer ones. The balanced modulator is actually a surface mount IC now mounted on the underside of the board. Has the VCO block that's not encased in epoxy. It actually mounts through and is soldered on the underside of the board. The board, there's actually a slot there. So like I say, it's one of the later versions. But still, it's overall pretty much the same radio. Just they've downsized the top, the wattage of a lot of resistors and stuff like that. They're cutting corners. That's basically what it comes to. But in any case, the no output power. So, of course, what happens when I turn it on and key the microphone power? It figures. So, I tried it a couple times and then, yep, sure enough. It wasn't on for very long. I keyed the mic, absolutely no output power. So that's a good thing. If somebody sends something in not working, you would prefer it to not work so you can actually get it fixed. The last thing you want to do is send a radio back to the customer because you couldn't find a problem and then it just screws up on them again. So, now touching the circuit board, I figured, well, if it's working and not working, it's intermittent because it seemed to be when it was working, it was at full output power. And when it wasn't working, it had no output power, at least on the watt meter. There may have been a little bit if I had reached over and turned the spectrum analyzer on, but as far as the watt meter was concerned, yeah, it wasn't showing anything. But just pushing on the board a little bit, just touching it like that, flexing it just ever so slightly, it would key and it would work. And then you'd let go, unkey the mic, and you could let go of the board as long as you kept the microphone keyed, and it would work fine. As soon as you would let go of the mic, key it again, no output power. And I finally found the least amount of board touching you had to do was back here in the RF final section. So, first thing, check for bad solder joints, because that's the, sure signs of a bad solder joint when you touch the circuit board or if you flex it and your problems come or go. So did that, yeah, I even cracked out the microscope. Yep, still no luck. Took off the RF shields, soldered to the underside of the board, yeah, still nothing. I finally got to the point where I, kept basically finding, the spot on the board where it took less and less and less pressure touching it to make the power come back when you keyed the microphone. And finally, I got back to the actual final transistor. And so, I fired the scope up, checked that the driver, the input and the input power to the driver was fine. The output out of the driver was fine. Got over to the final. I had the appropriate amount of power going into the final, nothing out. Aha! So I pushed on it a little bit, and it came back full output power. So, well, must be missing voltage. So I'm in there at the voltmeter checking. Everything seemed fine. So what in the hell? So it's got to be a bad solder joint. It's lifted trace, cracked trace or something. So I desoldered all the components. Basically desoldered the final and the surrounding traces right there. Inspected them really good with a microscope, resoldered, basically put everything back together, keyed the microphone, nothing. It's like, you've got to be kidding me. Push on the and finally, I'm actually taking a ceramic screwdriver and actually just touch the lead of the actual final transistor, power would come back. So I disconnected the final from the rear chassis of the radio. Took the screw out and just kind of folded it forward a little bit. Turn the radio back on, key the mic, no output power. Just barely the weight of this screwdriver just laid on top of the final, output power would come back. It wasn't a bad solder connection, it's actually a bad final. So, yeah, apparently it has a bad internal connection. Externally it's fine, but internally the bond between the actual lead and the actual silicon, the actual transistor component inside, there's a bad connection there. And actually, I don't know if it'll do it now. Let me grab my little peak component analyzer here, get it hooked up. But when I tested it earlier, it actually tested as a diode. Get my leads hooked up here. Now shorting out. Oh, get over there, little guy. Okay. Yep, and that's, I don't want to move it. Yeah, the lead's going to pop off. There. That's what it tested as, a diode. Matter of fact, it tests as 2 diodes, because you can see it flashing back and forth. So it's testing as 2 diodes, and it's not 2 diodes. It's a 2SC 1969 final transistor. So, yep, it's been replaced, stuck a new one in there, problem resolved. So if you ever run into a weird problem like that, yeah, I never always tell people, it never ceases to amaze me, some of the weird problems I run into nowadays. Shit like this, So, if you ever run into a problem with what I call chassis mounted parts, chassis mounted meaning they mount to the chassis as a heat sink, common problems a lot of times will be the actual solder connection will be bad between the lead where it folds over the bottom side of the board and is soldered. But, this just goes to show it can be a bad component where the components actually, and I would have to assume, because from the looks of the radio, it looks like it's got a lot of use. And I don't mean just, damage or whatnot to the cabinet. I mean the knobs. There's a lot of wear on the knobs. So that tells me that the radio was actually used a lot. So, it's not like this was a radio that was just thrown in a drawer and it's never been used. The transistor was bad from new. It's obviously, it's been used a considerable amount, enough to wear out wear some of the chrome off of the knobs on the front of the radio. So I'm almost wondering if it was just stress from, the chassis. This is aluminum, and the circuit board just, it flexing with heat cycling, and that just, over the years, that stress on these leads maybe has broken the bond wire between the actual lead and the actual, transistor that's, buried inside this epoxy housing. But yeah, I thought I'd share that with you. Like I say, there's something you don't see very often. A transistor that actually works, but is bad, where it doesn't work until you touch it, and then it works just fine, and it would continue to work. You didn't have to continue holding pressure on it. Once you touched it and you had output power, you could let go of it, and you could jiggle it, and it would work fine. But as soon as you unkeyed, took the power away, and tried again, yep, it would go dead. So there's just a quickie on another thing to keep an eye out for. Things that can go wrong. As if you don't have enough things that can go wrong with your radio, there's another one. Final transistors that decide to work when they want to.